by Search Ranch players. Welcome to the War of the Worlds. This is a special announcement for our in-house audience. First, thank you so much for coming. You're a vital part of this production. We would like to remind you to turn off your cell phones. If you happen to be connected to the Wi-Fi, please disconnect. Very critical because we are streaming live to the world through the link bit.ly/War of the Worlds Big Sur. You can feel free to send that link to your friends and families before disconnecting your phones. There will be no applause unless specifically requested in this manner. And so please, no other sounds. Keep every kind of movement and sound. The chairs make noise, so keep all of those things to a minimum. You're welcome to stay for dinner and snacks and drinks afterwards. We'll just be out on the back deck. So we will begin in 15 seconds with our production. No? Production beginning in 15 seconds. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Henry Miller Library on the air in the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. This production was created by Search Ranch players with only 1 day of practice. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of this production and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 21st century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves without their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied perhaps almost as narrowly as man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast, cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plan against us. In the 17th year of the 21st century came this great disillusionment. It was near the Ides of March. Business was booming. Some said it was on account of the Trump administration tax cut, while others gave credit to Obama. Whatever the case, more people were back at work and sales were picking up. On this particular evening, March the 18th, the Crosley service estimated that 432 people were listening in on their ham radios.
For the next 24 hours, not as much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Monterey Bay, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the central coast, bringing a forecast of rain accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature, 66. Minimum, 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We now take you to the Henry Miller Library in Big Sur, California, where you will be entertained by the music of Search Ranch Quartet.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Henry Miller Library in Big Sur, we bring you the music of the Search Ranch Quartet.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 4 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory in Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the Mira Observatory in Jamesburg, California, confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of the Search Ranch Quartet, playing for you live at the Henry Miller Memorial Library in Big Sur, California. We are now ready to take you to the observatory at Jamesburg, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Roberta Pearson. She is a famous astronomer. We take you now to Jamesburg.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the Mira Observatory in Jamesburg, California. I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through a giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now, because Mars happens to be the point nearest the Earth. In opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips. Although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for those gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance. Thank you. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just sent a text message to Professor Pearson. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Jamesburg, California, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, please. Professor Pearson has just shown me the text message. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a text message addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Quote, 3:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Moss Landing. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Unquote. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbance observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Jamesburg, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our Big Sur studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been hearing the Search Ranch Quartet. Here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of McGill University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 3:45 p.m. and 4:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home comes a special announcement from Salinas, California. It is reported that at 4:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Moss Landing, just a few miles from Salinas. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far south as Paso Robles. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene and will have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a description as soon as he can reach there from Jamesburg. In the meantime, we take you to Sly McFly's in Monterey, where Bobby Millette and his orchestra are offering a program of Spanish guitar. We take you now, ladies and gentlemen, to Moss Landing, California.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again at the Moonglow Dairy Farm in Moss Landing, California. Professor Pearson and myself made the 30 miles from Jamesburg, 10 minutes by helicopter. Well, I hardly know where to begin to paint for you a word picture of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of the X-Files. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. It must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree. It must have struck on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge orange metallic cylinder. It has the diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say? What is that diameter?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like this. The color is impossibly orange. Curious spectators are now pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind taking to one side, please?
One side there, one side. Hey, get on one side.
While the sheriff's deputies are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Lou Calcogno, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Calcogno, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? Step closer, please. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Calcogno.
Well, I was listening to the radio. Yeah.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me? Pardon me?
Louder, please, and closer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing. That professor fellow, he was talking about Mars, so I was just like a half dozing and a half laying around.
Yes.
You know.
And Mr. Calcogno, then what happened?
Well, as I was saying, I was listening to the radio, kind of halfways, and
Yes, Mr. Calcogno, and then you saw something?
no, not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
Oh, I heard a hissing sound. It went like this, like. Kind of like a 4th of July rocket, you know what I mean?
Then what?
Well, turned my head out the window and would have swore I was asleep to dreaming.
Yes?
Yeah, I seen a kind of orangish streak and then zingo! Something smacked the ground, knocked me clear out my chair.
Were you frightened, Mr. Calcogno?
Oh, well, I ain't quite sure. I mean, I reckon I was kind of riled.
Thank you, Mr. Calcogno.
Yeah, you want me to tell you some more?
No,
I got
that's
lots-
quite all right.
oh.
That's plenty.
Oh, all right.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Calcogno, owner of the Moonglow Dairy, where this orange object has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this, the fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in the field in back of us. Everybody wants to see the orange object and get closer to it. Police are trying to rope off the roadway leading to the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Cars' headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are now venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the edge orange metal sheen. Wait, one man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with a deputy. The deputy wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but now it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you caught it already on your radio, but listen. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that comes from inside the object. I'll move the microphone near. Now we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I see. Do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
Well, I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth, and as you can see, of a cylindrical shape.
Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw. The orange thing must be hollow.
Look at it's moving! Look, the darn thing's on
Maybe there's a man trying to escape.
Oh, God.
What is that?
Over there! Keep back!
Oh.
Keep back!
Look out there, stand back!
Loose!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. top. Someone or something. I can see peering out of the black hole 2 luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be.
Oh, my
Good heavens! Something dripping out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now another. And another. They look like tentacles to me. I can see the thing's body. It's large, large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent's. The mouth is V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down by gravity. The thing's racing up. Oh, the crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Moonglow Dairy Farm, Moss Landing, California. We now return to you, Carl Phillips at Moss Landing.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Calcagno's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk, as long as I can see. More deputies have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Yes, now they parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the objects, while the captain and the 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. Oh, I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. It's a flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means, wait, something's happening. Oh my God. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. Wait, what's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror. It leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flame. Now the whole field's caught fire. The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles. It's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way. About 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Moonglow Dairy. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Indelkoffer, oh God. Professor Indelkoffer, speaking at a meeting of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We now continue with our piano interlude.
Thank you, Search Ranch Quartet. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Moss Landing by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 sheriff's deputies, lie dead in a field east of the village of Moss Landing, their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Monterey County Sheriff Steve Bernal.
I have been requested by Governor Brown to place the counties of Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by law enforcement or military authorities.
Wait a minute, we just had a question about here. How many tentacles do the aliens have? I don't even know what is going on. When are you going to give more information?
You have just been listening to Monterey County Sheriff Steve Bernal. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Moss Landing are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of the firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments in Monterey County are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Moss Landing, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you... Just one moment, please, listener. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Moss Landing, where she has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, she will give you her explanation of the calamity. The next voice you hear will be that of Professor Pearson.
Of the creatures in the orange rocket cylinder at Moss Landing, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have an ethical compass far inferior to our own. It is my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in an echo chamber of fear, hatred, and greed. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a bulletin from Salinas, California. It is a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Salinas hospital. Moving on now, here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. The Office of the Director of the National Red Cross reports 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the U.S. Army unit stationed at Fort Hunter Liggett. Here's a statement from Monterey County officials. The fires at Moss Landing and vicinity are now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit and no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Miss Henrietta McDonald, the Vice President in charge of operations for Columbia Broadcasting System.
We have received a request from the newly formed militia at Salinas to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Salinas.
What problem is this at all?
Miss McDonald, over here! Over here! Miss McDonald!
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Salinas, California.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the Army unit now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Moss Landing. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in a pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. All cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads above the pits. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It looks almost like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Elkhorn Slough. Probably a fire started by illegal campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank. A quick thrust, and it will be all over. Oh, wait a minute. I see something on top of the cylinder. Oh, no, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of the Calgano farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an orange metal tube. Wait, that's not a shadow, it's something moving. Solid metal, or is it Teflon? Kind of a shield-like affair rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Oh my God! It's standing on legs! Actually rearing up on some sort of a hulking metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees and the searchlights are on it. Hold on!
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the California farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Moss Landing has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by any army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Moss Landing to Salinas, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of much of Central California and has effectively cut the state through its center. Cell phone towers are down throughout the region. All the roads that haven't been torn up are clogged with traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. At this time, martial law prevails throughout most of Central California. We take you now to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke.
Citizens of the nation, I shall try not to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and the property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a small part of a blue state, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
Wait,
Mr. taking over here?
How many tentacles do they still have? We don't even know. Where did you go?
You have just heard the Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke, speaking from Washington. Emails too numerous to read are piling up in the studio here. Here's a special one from New York. Others have been received from English, French, German, scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempt made to locate Professor Pearson of Jamesburg, who has observed Martians at close range. It is feared he was lost in recent battle. Carmel Valley, California. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving south towards Big Sur, with hundreds fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use, although advancing at express train speed. Invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making conscious effort to destroy as many trees as possible, and they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and cell phones and radio towers. Their apparent objective is to crush the resistance, paralyze its communication, and disorganize American society. Here's a bulletin from Carmel Valley. Fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives, flying south in pursuit of enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep speeding enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the volunteer artillery line in Palo, Colorado to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy.
Range 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire!
140 yards to the right, sir.
Shift range 31 meters.
31 meters.
Projection 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire!
Hot damn! We got the tripod, one of them. They stopped. The others are trying to repair it.
Quick! Get the range! Shift 30 meters.
30 meters.
Projection 27 degrees.
27 degrees.
Fire!
Can't see the shell land. They're letting off smoke.
What is it?
A black smoke. Moving this way. Lying close to the ground. It's moving fast.
Put on gas masks. Get ready to fire. Shift 24 meters.
24 meters.
Projection 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire!
I still can't see. The smoke's coming nearer.
Get the range.
23 meters.
23 meters.
23 meters. Projection 22 degrees.
22 degrees.
Army bombing plane V-843 off Rocky Point, Big Sur. Lieutenant Vaught, commanding 8 bombers, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Fort Hunter Liggett Field. Break. Enemy tripod machine now in sight. Break. Reinforced by 3 machines from Orange Moss Landing Cylinder. Break. I see 6 altogether. Break. 1 machine already crippled, believed hit by shell from Army gun. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to the earth, of extreme density, nature unknown. No sign of heat ray. Enemy pushes south, crossing the Little Sur River. Evident objective is the Henry Miller Library, capital of the resistance. They're starting to pull down the Bixby Bridge. The machines are close together now, and we're ready to attack. Planes are circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards. 800 yards, 600 yards, 400 yards, 200 yards. There they go. The giant arm raised. Green flash. They're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance. Only one thing left, drop. first one. Now then, is that 8?
This is the Presidio of Monterey calling Fort Hunter Liggett. This is the Presidio of Monterey calling Fort Hunter Liggett. Come in, please.
This is Fort Hunter Liggett. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Bixby Creek. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is Salinas, California. This is Salinas, California. Warning, poisonous black smoke pouring from local wetland marshes, reaching South Main Street. Gas masks useless. Urge population to get out of town as quickly as possible, but to follow traffic laws so there are no accidents. Smoke now spreading over Alisal Street.
2X2L, calling QC. 2X2L, calling QC. 2X2L, calling 8X3R. Come in, please.
This is 8X3R. Coming back at 2X2L.
How's reception? How's reception? Okay, please. Where are you? 8X3R. What's the matter? Where are you? I'm speaking from the top of Ventana Inn in Big Sur. Those bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate as the Martians approach. All communication with Palo, Colorado closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end, getting reports now that enemy is in sight by Point Sur. Five great machines heading our way. This just in off the wire. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside San Francisco, one in Los Angeles, Seattle. They seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine comes into sight on Highway 1. He stands watching, looking over the forest and waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the highway behind him. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out. Black smoke drifting over the forest. People in their cars see it now. They're mostly out of their cars now, running south toward the gorge. Thousands of them dropping like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Fernwood. People trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing the Big Sur River, Big Sur Station, the Big Sur Tap House. "2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling 2XCL calling CQ. New York. Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
You are listening to a CBS presentation of Orson Welles and the Henry Miller Memorial Library on the Air in an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, performed by Search Ranch Players. The performance will continue after a brief intermission. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living person on Earth. I have been hiding in this empty house near Moss Landing, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems part of another life, a life that has no continuity with the present, furtive existence of the lonely derelict who pencils these words on the back of some astronomical notes bearing the signature of Roberta Pearson.
I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with a fisherman who lives in Moss Landing, and who on the night of March 18 glimpsed an orange invader from a distant planet. My wife, my children, my family and friends, where are they? Did they ever exist? What day is this? Do days exist without calendars? Does time when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks?
Morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas has lifted, and the scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road. No traffic. Here and there, a wrecked car. Baggage overturned. A blackened skeleton. I push on south. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them. And I keep a careful watch. I have seen the Martians feed. Should one of their machines appear over the top of the trees, I am ready to fling myself flat on the earth. I come to a mandarin tree. I fill my pockets. I must keep alive. 2 days, I wander in a vague southerly direction through a scorched, desolate world. Finally, I notice a living creature, a small red squirrel in an oak tree. I stare at him and I wonder. He stares back at me, and I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion, the joy of just finding another living being.
After parting with the artillerymen, I came at last to the Pfeiffer Canyon Bridge. I crossed the span, anxious to know the fate of the great Henry Miller Library. I reached Post Ranch, and there again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I wandered up along the route. I stood alone on the deck of Nepenthe and watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly, I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing on Highway 1, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea. I rushed to a better vantage point on the deck, and from there I could see, standing in a silent row along the highway, 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their great steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabit those machines. They had stopped just before the library. Suddenly, My eyes were attracted to the immense flock of black birds that hovered directly below me. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in the laboratories, it was found that they were killed by the putrefactive disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain after all man's defenses had failed by the humblest thing that God, in his wisdom, put upon this earth.
Before the orange cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that though all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. Dim and perhaps wonderful is the vision that I've conjured in my mind of spreading slowly from this little seedbed of the solar system throughout the inanimate vastness of space. But that is a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, is the future perhaps ordained.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen, out of character to assure you that the War of the Worlds was no further significance than as a playful offering it was intended to be. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You'll be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, and both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember the terrible lesson you learned tonight. It was all fake news.
Tonight, the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations coast to coast have brought you The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, the 17th in its weekly series of dramatic broadcasts featuring Orson Welles and the Henry Miller Memorial Library on the air, performed by Search Ranch Players. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System. Credits go to the technical team, Andy Crutchfield and Cowboy. The music department, Ann Guthrie and Samuel Kahn. The Foley department, Emily Gottlieb, Kevin Miller, and Blake Joplin. Production management by Marissa Bertel and Katie Pofall. Script dramaturgy by David Schmaltz. Art direction by Emily Underwood. Photography by Jenny Shedden and Lana. Theatrical department, Sarah Rubin, Blake Jopling, and Gail St. Aubin. Special thanks to the Henry Miller Memorial Library for supporting this production, and especially to Mr. Magnus Torin. And we would like to present this memorial poster to Mr. Torin.
Thank you. Wow.
Signed by the cast. Good job, guys. Yeah. Thank you, audience. Signing off from Columbia Broadcasting System. Until the next Martian invasion.